In Book 5 of Aristotle's Politics, a significant section is devoted to maintaining tyranny. I'm going to read for you a few excerpts from the text. The tyrant should lop off those who are too high. He must put to death men of spirit. He must not allow common meals, clubs, education, and the like. He must be upon his guard against anything which is likely to inspire either courage or confidence among his subjects. He must prohibit literary assemblies or other meetings for discussion, and he must take every means to prevent people from knowing one another, for acquaintance begets mutual confidence. Further, he must compel all persons staying in the city to appear in public and live at his gates. Then he will know what they are doing. If they are always kept under, they will learn to be humble. A tyrant should also endeavor to know what each of his subjects says or does, and should employ spies, for the fear of informers prevents people from speaking their minds, and if they do, they are more easily found out. Another art of the tyrant is to sow quarrels among the citizens. Friends should be embroiled with friends, the people with the notables, and the rich with one another. Also, he should impoverish his subjects. He thus provides against the maintenance of a guard by the citizens, and the people, having to keep hard at work, are prevented from conspiring. The tyrant is also fond of making war in order that his subjects may have something to do, and be always in want of a leader. And whereas the power of a king is preserved by his friends, the characteristic of a tyrant is to distrust his friends, because he knows that all men want to overthrow him, and they above all have the power. It is characteristic of a tyrant to dislike everyone who has dignity or independence. He wants to be alone in his glory. But anyone who claims a like dignity or asserts his independence encroaches upon his prerogative, and is hated by him as an enemy to his power. Another mark of the tyrant is that he likes foreigners better than citizens, and lives with them and invites them to his table. For the one are enemies, but the others enter into no rivalry with him. Such are the notes of the tyrant and the arts by which he preserves his power. There is no wickedness too great for him. All that we have said may be summed up under 3 heads, which answer to the 3 aims of the tyrant. These are, 1. The humiliation of his subjects. He knows that a mean-spirited man will not conspire against anybody. 2. The creation of mistrust among them, for a tyrant is not overthrown until men begin to have confidence in one another, and this is the reason why tyrants are at war with the good. 3. The tyrant desires that his subjects shall be incapable of action, for no one attempts what is impossible, and they will not attempt to overthrow a tyranny if they are powerless. Look over any form of tyranny you can find, and you'll probably see that this series of passages adequately describes them. From any fascist, socialist, communist, or theocratic state, all the way down to that terrible store manager who drove their department into the ground. They all share those 3 aims that Aristotle described: humiliation of the people, pitting the people against each other, and making the people powerless. But I think there's a better way to conceptualize the tyrant, at least for our purposes here. Rather than his aims, in this video series, let's discuss the behaviors of the tyrant. I'll start with the simplest one first, the love of the foreign. Another mark of a tyrant is that he likes foreigners better than citizens, and lives with them and invites them to his table. For the one are enemies, but the others enter into no rivalry with him. It almost seems strange at first glance that a tyrant wouldn't fear foreigners. Foreign armies, for example, pose a serious threat to all states, not just tyrannical ones, and a tyrant certainly has more to fear from a well-equipped foreign force at his gates than a malcontent population wishing to rise up but finding themselves entirely unable to do so. But most foreigners, most of the time, do not show up in the form of an army. Most of them are travelers and merchants, with exotic wares, exotic ideas, and exotic tales. The stereotype of the king wanting oddities brought to court for his entertainment was absolutely a thing. To the tyrant, the foreign posed little threat, because the foreign rarely arrived in force, and often simply passed through his realm peacefully, providing both knowledge and goods from beyond his borders. Let me shift gears a little bit. This is a textbook from my university, from my Introduction to Critical Theory class. The class was basically a crash course on postmodernism. Thankfully, I came out of that indoctrination largely unscathed, but this book contains everything. Derrida and Foucault, feminist critical theory and queer theory and post-colonial theory and all. One thing I can tell you right off the bat is that the postmodernists are absolutely obsessed with constructing dichotomies. A dichotomy is an either-or switch, where everything under the purview of it exists in one state or another with no in-between. This is another reason why progressives have to learn to code. Their binary thinking probably makes them good for it. This specific method of what really is just oversimplification comes from Marxism as far as I can tell, where the distinctions of the people who were not strictly bourgeoisie and not strictly proletariat were wiped clean in order to make way for a grand class struggle. This is the philosophical basis as to why identity politics almost always takes on the form of a ruling class versus everyone else. Race relations, for example, are boiled down to white people versus people of color, despite the fact that there are many different types of white people, many of whom have also suffered from racism, or that there are many different types of people of color, and lumping black people in with natives and Arabs and Indians and Asians is actually pretty racist. But none of that matters to the postmodernist. That's all just counter-revolutionary thought, because for the class struggle, the race war to begin, the issue has to be dichotomized first. By the way, I have no idea how queer theory reconciles this with gender fluidity and bisexuality, but I'm gonna guess that they just sweep it under the rug. So where am I going with all this? Remember, before we can understand a tyrant's behavior, we've got to look at it with his aims in mind. And before we can understand a postmodernist thoughts on the situation, we have to dichotomize it. So if we have a postmodernist flavored tyranny, which I think is an accurate description of social justice and the radical left right now, how would they dichotomize their love of the foreign? Well, you can ask Google, a company refusing to work with the US government, but is bending over backwards to work with the Chinese government. Or maybe you can ask Hassan Piker, an American citizen living in America who recently made the claim that America deserved 9/11, and that the terrorist group the Mujahideen were comprised of brave soldiers.
I can't do this. I can't do this. Guy has the understanding of foreign policy of like a 12-year-old. What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with this dude? Didn't he go to war and like literally lose his eye because some Mujahideen, a brave fucking soldier, fucked his eye hole with their dick? Isn't that how he lost his fucking dumbass eye? Because he got his fucking eye hole fucked? America deserved 9/11, dude. Fuck it. I'm saying it.
Or maybe you can ask one of the thousands of American Antifa members who march under the banner of anti-Americanism. When you dichotomize the love of the foreign, then you're left with a hatred of the domestic. China is considered better than America, not because China's good, China's awful, but because it's not American. It doesn't matter how evil the foreign is. It being foreign is virtue enough in their eyes. And we can see this in all sorts of ways. There's mundane things, like self-hating white people calling others mayonnaise eaters on Twitter, as opposed to consuming the properly black condiment, hot sauce. But then there's far more serious matters, like the open borders movement. They believe that borders themselves are racist, that restricting the free movement of people is a racist act. You can't build a wall, you can't have sensible immigration policy, you can't deport illegal immigrants, and you can't detain interlopers at the border who are trying to sneak in, because that's all racist, even if it's not based on race. In their worldview, it doesn't actually have to be based on race to be racist, because once you've dichotomized the issue, everything that is not your preferred end state is all the same level of immorality. Anything that is not a love of the foreign has to be racist, even when it's not. Every time you see woke progressives trip over themselves to show just how much they hate their own place of origin, they're likely operating using this philosophy, even if they can't really articulate it. I'm not saying there's not legitimate reasons to dislike your origins, sometimes there really is, but that can't be used as a blanket excuse to hate the entire culture and everyone in it. I'm also not saying there's not legitimate reasons to love the foreign, there obviously is as well. When somebody's new to my country, I often find that people give them a little bit more leeway if they make a minor mistake. At least for the first little bit, because 9 times out of 10 it's just an honest mistake with no harm done. I know for serious stuff, ignorance of the law is no excuse, but when it comes to cultural norms and niceties and other minor things, we've always accepted the idea that not knowing the rules makes the infraction a little less serious. Personally, I remember meeting a student at university from an interior African country who had never encountered a stoplight before, and he spent his youth crossing the street wantonly and dodging cars. After I showed him that yes, if you push this button, the cars will actually stop and let you cross, he remarked that nobody would ever respect that rule where he came from. But from then on, he was happy to press the button and wait. I didn't think he was an idiot, I just knew that he didn't know. Additionally, cultural exchange is one of the big reasons our civilization has reached the heights it has. All of our greatest disciplines have been hodgepodged together by individuals from different parts of the globe, each with their own mindset, each contributing their own little bit to the larger invention. And to be honest, having access to 100 different cultural foods in one city is pretty awesome too. I love me some sushi. Our culture is one of the best things that we can offer to the rest of the world. And they can offer theirs to us too. We don't need to accept all the barbaric stuff, obviously, but that doesn't mean that all foreign cultures are all bad. I think that this was the original point of multiculturalism, before it got completely warped by this dichotomization. In fact, if you believe in the idea of cultural appropriation, like a lot of SJWs do, then you can't have a multicultural society. They're mutually exclusive ideas. In a multicultural society, citizens adopt the good bits of other cultures to create a greater whole. But that's considered a cardinal sin by social justice due to appropriation. And so now we return to tyranny. It's no surprise to anyone that the radical left seeks to impose a social tyranny. They have a love of the foreign because they're fundamentally privileged people. Elites living on coastal cities, working in air-conditioned offices, where the effects of their love of the foreign on their lives boils down to shawarma stands on every street corner, cheap labor to do the dirty jobs they're too good for, and a warm, fuzzy feeling in their heart that they did their part to help out those poor brown folk they so look down on. So, in their eyes, anyone who disagrees with them must be a racist, because they've got no other conceptual space for them in their worldview. Any legitimate complaints with their position are met with condemnation using language meant to demean for not being foreign enough. Nativist, nationalist, populist, or, especially in the States, white. This is even how non-white conservatives can be labeled as white people, or how photographs consisting of only black women are considered the most diverse, because the entire issue is dichotomized. Kanye West is a white person only in a world where everything that is not a love of the foreign must be a hatred of the domestic. Anytime you see a progressive talk about diversity, or spout off the virtues of open borders and mass migration, recognize that this is the philosophy behind their mindset, and that its source, ultimately, is tyranny. Oftentimes they won't know any of this, they'll just talk like they're possessed by their ideology. They'll truly believe they're doing a good thing or that they're on the right side of history. They're doing what they've been told to do without really thinking about it. And how could they? Everything they oppose is just wrong. That's the dichotomy.
For whatever lived experience and identity that you represent, if you are not prepared to come to that table and to represent that voice, don't come. Because we don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. We don't need black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't need Muslims that don't want to be a Muslim voice. We don't need queers that don't want to be a queer voice. Come on, speak it.